She's a scientist, she's a mother, and she's probably run more in her life than you've even thought about walking. A truly astonishing athlete, Jasmin Paris, is here now. I'm James Poulos. Welcome to 0 Hour. In addition to her hard work as a mother and a research scientist, she's also a fell runner. We'll get into that. And a small animal vet. She won the 268-mile mountain spine race outright, breaking the overall record and beating her nearest rival by 15 hours. She recently became the first woman to finish the Barkley Marathons in Tennessee, something considered impossible for a woman. It's not impossible. She's right here. Welcome, Jasmin.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being with us. So there's so much here to get into. I'm really excited to just really do a deep dive into how it is that you're able to do what you do and how everyone watching can make sense of that and maybe even incorporate some of that into their own lives. So let's unpack. It all started with the fell running, right? And so for those who don't know, that means that you're basically running uphill either most or maybe even all of a race. Obviously a lot more taxing than just running on flat ground. How did you get started realizing that there was just something about you that you could tap into to begin to do things that for most people were just never going to happen?
I mean, I started fell running because I'd done a lot of hiking with my parents as a child, and just loved being in the mountains and in wild places. And I think for me, starting to hill run and fell run, as we call it here, was a really natural thing to do. It was just a way of moving more quickly across the landscape and a way of getting into the hills every day before work, on top of a busy day-to-day job. So I started fell running and then started doing more races, and just quickly realized that I like doing long races and technical races, and I like the kind of journey. I like spending time outside with other people, making friends, having time to eat, look at the views. So that's why I kind of started doing longer and longer sort of races. But and I guess I gradually realized that I was good at that sort of stuff, at the long stuff and the technical stuff. And it's always just been about kind of enjoying it and having fun and being outside in the wild places.
It's all very logical. It's efficient. You can squeeze it in the morning. Did you feel that you were sort of set up genetically in any way? Did you have relatives, family members who you thought, wow, if they can do it, I can too?
I think my mum's, I think she's got a lot of endurance. I mean, I think when she was at university, she'd go kind of on the long distance skiing trips with the boys at a time when the girls didn't do that. I think she was the first woman that they brought along type thing. So I guess I have that genetic streak. Certainly, as I think my mum spent a lot of time doing kind of endurance hiking and skiing in the mountains, and my dad's quite competitive in his football and stuff. So I guess I probably had a bit from both sides.
Probably a little bit of nature as well as nurture. It sounds like you were in a very life-affirming environment growing up and just sort of in your family surroundings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was incredibly lucky, and I've got 3 brothers, and I mean we're always treated exactly the same. I never felt that I couldn't do anything on account of being a girl. The world was my oyster, and that's what I was brought up to believe, that if you want to do something and you kind of set your heart on it, and go ahead and give it everything you've got and believe in yourself, sort of thing. So I was always given all the opportunities, and I never felt that there were barriers in my way, which was a wonderful way, I think, to grow up, and given lots of time in the outdoors. My mum spent a lot of time outside with us in all weathers, and that just became my happy place. So I think that's why I love being in the mountains and running so much.
Okay, so you recognized pretty early on that this was something that maybe you could get into. It sort of grew on you as you went. Talk a little bit about that happy place. When did you first realize that you did find peace in what would seem to many people to be a really extraordinary, harsh environment? And how did you find that peace was something that you could not just tap into, but also deepen and sort of stretch out into?
Yeah, I guess it was sometime when I was sort of in my late teens. Me and my brother, the one that's just sort of a year younger, we spent a lot of time sort of hiking in the mountains all over Europe. We typically take a rucksack and go for maybe 7 to 10 days carrying all our food, so aiming not to see anyone. And it was those trips that we really had really big adventures in kind of wilderness, and we were quite naive and sort of, didn't even, I wouldn't say not necessarily knew what we were doing that much at that point, but we learned on the job, and we had some, fantastic times. And, it was all wild camping and just eating our way through the provisions that we had until we had nothing left, and then sort of dropping back into civilization. And I think around that, that was the time when I really, I guess I came to realize how much the mountains meant to me. And since, they give me this kind of sense of calm and perspective and peace. And, when you're in big mountains, it's awe-inspiring. You look around and you suddenly feel small, but in a good way. You can feel small in a city, but in a bad way. But in the mountains, I think it just makes you feel, that all the things that you worry about are not important. And, you just kind of feel bowled over by the awesomeness of nature. So that's the way I feel in the mountains. And I always get a slight sense of kind of, it hits you when you get back into civilization. It takes a while to adjust, I always find. But yeah, I do like to kind of get back to those wild places when I can.
Yeah, we'll get back to that experience in a little bit. I just want to make sure. So hill racing, pretty easy for people to understand conceptually. Spine racing, a little bit different, a little more complicated. How did you begin to slide into that world, and what exactly were you taking on?
Yeah, so the spine is different. That's a kind of, it's 268 miles. It's a non-stop race. It was the first sort of race of that nature that I'd ever done. And obviously, that race takes place in the middle of winter. It's mid-January. You have to carry all your kit. You have to navigate your way through the darkness. And probably 2/3 of the time you're running in darkness, and in pretty remote areas at times. So, for me, that was a completely new challenge, especially the sleep aspect, because, the more you sleep, the more you kind of lose places. But if you don't sleep at all, then you're potentially going to make some massive errors and then, drop out altogether. So it's a fine balance. And I actually just, the reason I signed up for it originally was, I guess it was when I was coming back into training after having my daughter, my first baby, and I kind of wanted a new challenge. Something that would keep me motivated. It was just going into the winter months. My daughter was about 10 months old or so. I was back at work full time, and so I was struggling to get up at train in the mornings at 5 a.m. And I think signing up for the spine was suddenly something that it gave me something to aim for, something to focus on, kind of motivation. And it really worked, actually. It kind of got me back out there doing the training. And it was nice to have a challenge that was different to something I'd done before pregnancy, because I think maybe other women that as kind of sports women will associate with this feeling. But it's difficult when you compare yourself to the way that you were before you had a kid. But if you sign up for something completely new and a different challenge altogether, then you've got nothing to compare yourself against. You can just go into it completely, new and excited about a different challenge. And I think that was a good thing for me as well.
I can relate to that. I love that feeling of newness, of stepping in a direction where, you think you got a decent shot, but in the end, you're not going to know until you try. I mean, I've back, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I probably peaked out at about 3 miles of jogging up in the hills per day. Never did a marathon, never did an ultra. I had a couple friends who have done ultras, and man, I'm telling you, like the horror stories that I've heard, the blisters, the vomiting, seems like a nightmare. And then you got to do it all on your own. When you're talking about over 200 miles, what's going through your head 5 minutes before you start?
I think by that point I was just kind of excited. I think the probably at that point the biggest thing for me was the fact that I was leaving my daughter for longer than I'd ever left her before.
Yeah.
Because I knew that even if I ran it at kind of the best pace that I thought I could manage, I still expected it to be 3 nights away from her, and I'd only ever been away for a night before, and I was still breastfeeding her at the time, so I knew that I was going to have to express milk at the checkpoints as well. So that was kind of an added challenge. And if anything, those were the kind of things that were going through my head more than the kind of physical aspect of whether I could make it to the end of the race. The sort of uncertainty in terms of the actual running was whether I could race it competitively at the front, because I did want to do that. I wanted to try and win it. I guess I knew that was a possibility. So yeah, all those things are going around in my head. But in some ways, once you get to the start line, the hard work's done. Like you've there's nothing more you can kind of plan for, train for. You just, once you've started, the worries go away. I think it's just that it's just those few moments of waiting to go that you can think about things. But once you're off, then it all fades away, and you just get into race mode and excited about what you're doing.
Yeah, that's incredible. Although you still have to somehow keep track of all the logistics, figuring out where you want to sleep, how long you want to sleep, how to make sure that you don't sleep too long or not enough, much less stopping at your pit stops and leaving a little milk behind as you go. How do you strike that balance? And I mean, I think this is applicable to just about everyone, especially when you're hitting some kind of rough sledding or real challenge in your life. Is when I go to the gym, I like turning my brain off. I know that if I just go through the movements and like lift the heavy stuff, then it'll all work out. There's sort of no risk of wandering off the path, getting eaten by bears, falling asleep and waking up too late. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But when you've got to do all these sort of planning and strategic calculations as you go through a race of that magnitude, how do you keep those things balanced?
Yeah, so I guess some of it's just determined by what the other competitors are doing. So, for example, the spine race, I was racing at the front of the field, and to some extent, deciding when to sleep depended a little bit on when other people were sleeping, because you kind of want to stay with the lead group, I guess. And what happened in the event was that we were I was with another racer through to about 200 miles, and at that point he stopped, and I was really keen to get away on my own. And when he stopped and went to sleep for an hour, I pushed on and got away and kept that lead all the way to the end. So that's what happened with the spine. So to some extent, it's determined by what other people do, but I guess you just have to sort of be ready to constantly make changes on your feet and adapt to conditions. And it's a kind of, I always think that ultra running is about so much more than just the physical aspects of being able to run, because there's the mental aspect, there's the kind of being able to keep yourself warm and fed and navigate it and all those sorts of things. So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider, but I think that's one of the skills of being able to kind of multitask and do all that when you're sleep deprived as well.
Well, I got to say, you make it all sound pretty fun, pretty enjoyable. Were there ever dark moments? Any times when you went through and sort of thought, gosh, I might not be able to do this, or sort of, just it all kind of got on top of you?
Yeah, there's definitely dark moments in these things, especially like, the sleep deprivation can be pretty tough, both from the point of view of, you do these races and sometimes you're so desperate to sleep. It's like you're falling asleep on your feet. You're having micro sleeps on your feet, and then you find your legs are kind of crossing over. And that's all right if you're somewhere like the Pennine Way when I was running the spine race, because there's no big drops. But if you're racing a big race in the Alps and you're tripping over like that, you need to lie down and have a power nap, because it's pretty dangerous to be.
It's a long way to the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think that once you've gone through 2 nights of no sleep, you start to have hallucinations as well. At least I do. And I always find that the first time I start to see things in a race, then it takes me a little while to realize that I'm hallucinating, and those first kind of hallucinations seem very real and maybe a little bit more kind of daunting. But after a while, you realize that you're hallucinating, and you can just almost kind of find things entertaining, distracting. When you're kind of hurting, you might look at something and think that's really incredible, that sort of vampire sat in his big kind of throne that I'm walking past type thing. So yeah, that was something that I saw on Barkley last year, as I was climbing up the hill, and I remember walking past them and thinking, it's really odd that I'm not scared of this, because this is like really freaky, but I was just kind of interested in it. So it's a weird thing what hallucinations do with your head.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so the work, I mean, just to think that you had to take time off from work to do this was scientific research then?
Yeah, so I do a mixture. Oh, you mean like in terms of do you mean what work I do, or do you mean like in terms? Yeah, yeah. So I'm a small animal vet, and I do a mixture of, yeah. So I do clinical work, which is, I actually work as a specialist vet. So I work in the university hospital. So I'm teaching students and junior specialists, and I do small animals, cats and dogs, internal medicine, and I do that about 40% of the time, and then I do a bit of undergraduate teaching, and then I do probably 50% of my time's research. So that's specifically looking at kind of human chronic biliary diseases, so liver diseases basically. So I do, yeah, it's pretty full on trying to be a clinical academic alongside a mum, and I guess, an athlete. But yeah, in some ways it kind of is a good balance, because I find that the sport is, for me, is like a form of, it's like a release. It's a time when I kind of get to let all those stresses out and just be me. So I find it actually really complements.
Yeah, that's beautiful
kind
that you're splitting your time, aside from family, of course, between caring in expert ways for small animals and then taking on some of the biggest challenges that just seem to be outside of all human proportions sometimes. But I like that there's a balance. I think it sort of makes sense to me. It's you just, I don't know. I've seen people so many times, friends, colleagues, whatever, just over the years. The temptation is to try to plow yourself into your work to get that feeling of euphoria or of sort of liftoff. And sometimes that just ends up screwing people up a little bit more than helping them to reach a higher level. What would you say? I mean, maybe people come up to you and ask, or if they recognize you, or if they've known you before, do they turn to you for sort of advice, like sort of how to get dialed in their own lives, whether it's at a spiritual level or just kind of a nuts and bolts like physiological level?
Yeah, firstly, I feel like it's really odd being asked for advice like that, because I don't feel like I'm kind of qualified to give anybody advice. But I guess from my own experience, I would say that if try to keep something that's for you, and especially once you kind of become a parent, I think it's difficult to alongside work to keep something that's just about you. And I personally found that having running as I say, it helps me be a better parent, and it also kind of gets helps me deal with the stress of work, because it's a pretty kind of stressful job. But I also think it's really good for the next generation, for my kids, to see that I'm not just taking them around from swimming class to gymnastics class and kind of with my whole life revolving around them. It's good for them to see that I've got a hobby as well, because if you want them to grow up like that with a passion and be ambitious and believe in themselves, then you need to lead by example, don't you? So whilst sometimes I feel guilty for going out training in the early mornings and leaving them behind, I think it's good in the long run that they see that mum does something as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Sometimes you hear just the horror stories or see them on TV about super ambitious, high-performing parents. They pour everything into what it is that they're best at, and the kids, they seem to suffer for that. Even just someone like Mick Jagger, who does what he does, he's still doing it, and then he kind of says, "Oh yeah, they can make their own money. I don't know." And you kind of wonder, what are the kids being left with? Another example that I always think about when I think about these things: Peter the Great, Tsar of Russia. He, one of these towering figures, and his son was just sort of a hopeless mess. Never got the attention, never had the spotlight on him, and it was never really encouraged. What do you see in your children? Do you worry about trying to project things onto them? It is such a gulf between a human being at really peak performance and just like a little, whether it's like a little animal or a little human baby. How do you cross that gulf with your kids?
I feel like it's firstly my training and kind of running in general doesn't interfere with them that much. I do all my training early in the morning, so I'm generally back by the time we kind of still get back in time to take my son and drop him at nursery on the way to work, and then I kind of do the pickups, and we all have family dinner together. And at weekends I still train early in the morning, so I'm back in time to take them swimming and for the 10 o'clock, and then have the whole day together. And we spend lots of time together in the outdoors as well, trips in the hills and things. So I guess in terms of my ambitions for them, it's really just I want them to be happy. I'd be really glad if I can, pass on that love of the outdoors, just because I think it's been a really positive thing for me mentally. And I know that lots of other people feel that way as well. To have some kind of appreciation and link to the natural world is a really good thing, I think. But they don't have to be, they've tried lots of different sports and they're doing lots of things. They seem to really enjoy the things that they do, but I have no ambitions for them other than that they're happy and that they that they do whatever they want to do, and that they're good people. So that's my ambitions for them.
So it's very beautiful, and I can really understand how it would feel bizarre when people come and sort of solicit you for advice about how to think about their own lives, or some of those grander questions. But from what I can tell, you don't look like you've been through the ringer on the level of running hundreds and hundreds of miles. I know it can really do a number on people depending on I mean, look, some excellent athletes can injure themselves all the time, and I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't an issue for you. But, you know, what kind of a toll has it taken on your body, and do people actually ask you for sort of more, you know, practical physical advice?
So I think, I mean, I think that's interesting. I think as you get older, you take, even just, you know, in the last 15 years that I've been running, over that time, I've kind of seen that I don't recover quite as quickly anymore. But I think the things that have helped me is doing strength work has made a massive difference in terms of me as a runner being able to cope with, I guess, fend off any injuries. So I think if I was giving advice to runners in terms of trying to, as I say, keep themselves injury free, it would be to take on regular strength training, as part of that, incorporate that into their regular training plan. For sure I've had injuries. I think I had a lot when I first started running because I just was really enthusiastic, which I still am. But in those days I just kind of did things without ever bothering to train for them. So I ran my first 33-mile ultra on the back of essentially not doing any long training at all, apart from one 17-mile race, and that was it. And then I just went and did an ultra, and it was fine. Like, I finished it fine, but then I did 3 ultras in 6 weeks, and I got injured at the end of that, which is not really surprising because, as I say, no training at all for it, and then just to do that. But that was the sort of thing I did at the start, and so I think I've got a bit better at kind of judging how ready I am. And also, once you kind of reach a certain level, then it's more of just kind of keeping it ticking over and doing the strength work and stuff.
Can you share some of your fitness routine, or is that a trade secret?
It's not like in terms of the strength work. I just do an online class, so 3 times a week for half an hour, and that's really a mixture of like upper body, core, legs. But mainly I do it with weights, which I think makes a big difference. Like, I don't think you get stronger until you start to incorporate weights. But I also do some cross training. I swim. I do kind of outdoor swimming. We live beside a reservoir, so in a really beautiful place. I cycle when I'm working in the lab. I kind of cycle commute. So all these things help. When the kids were small, I obviously did quite a lot of carrying kids up mountains, and that's really good for kind of, it's like having a weight belt, but much heavier if you've got kids that grow as quickly as ours do. So all those sorts of things. In terms of the amount of training that I do, I just kind of, I guess I have one day off a week, and then at weekends I tend to do my long runs, and then sometime midweek I have a kind of speed session, yeah, the rest is kind of more fillers.
Do you take the same day off every week?
Yeah, I take Monday off every week. So yeah, I don't do anything that day, and no strength work, no running. The only thing I do is commute by bike. That's the only thing I would do that.
Yeah. Okay. So you got the strength training. You've got the flexibility. Obviously, a huge part of fitness. If you're going to be moving your arms and legs that much, I keep trying to, you know, that's for any man who lifts weights. There's always this like, don't forget to stretch part, and that's always a challenge. But what about, you know, I mean, I got to ask, is this all natty? Are you, do you have a stack of supplements? You doing any of that kind of stuff? Or do you pride yourself on just doing it the natural way?
I don't. So I guess when I was doing, I don't, so basically the answer is no. I tried to be, like, my diet in general has shifted more vegan, more plant-based, just because of concerns about the environment and the climate crisis. As a family, we're not vegan, but we don't really eat very much meat anymore. So I guess I take when I've had really kind of big training sessions, I've have a plant protein drink in the morning sometimes, on my way to work, as well as eating a piece of toast. But it's largely because I don't really have much time, so I'm actually eating breakfast kind of on the way to work, and just to make sure that I actually get some nutrition in after having done the training session. And that was definitely in the run up to Barkley, I was doing that. But mostly, honestly, it's just home cooked food, lots of fruit and veg, like pulses, brown bread, brown pasta, just kind of those sorts of things. We cook everything from scratch, and don't really kind of eat much processed stuff.
How about protein? I didn't hear a lot about proteins in there.
Yeah, so I guess pulses and lentils. I guess when we things like nuts, quite a lot of nuts. And if we're eating as a family, then we still eat dairy, eat tofu, that sort of thing.
Yeah, my goodness. How much longer do you want to do these kinds of massive races? Rest of your life?
I mean, I guess as long as I'm kind of excited about doing
Yeah.
them. So
Have you ever
me, it's
been
just.
have you ever been tempted to take on some other kind of competitive sport?
I think so. Yeah, I think at some point I'd quite like to do some of the kind of Ironman. There's triathlons just here in Scotland. There's like one called the Keltman, which I'd quite like to do just because I do enjoy wild swimming as well, and the cycling is something that I'm not that great at naturally, but I think I've always been kind of excited by the idea of a new challenge. So I definitely think I'll do something like that once at some point, just because of the kind of thrill of doing something new. I probably am going to run the London Marathon next year, I think, and I've never run a road marathon before. But again, that's just because I'm kind of excited to see what would be possible, and I'll have a go at the training for it, and then go back to the hills, no doubt. But so yeah, I always like to try new challenges and kind of see what's possible.
Sure. I'm interested in this swimming thing. I think by wild swimming you mean like free swimming or something, where you're just kind of out in open water from some point of land to another and back. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, exactly. So not in a pool, just, in open kind of. We don't live right next to the sea, but that would be the kind of nicest thing. But as I say, we live next to a really big reservoir, so I can outdoor swim there.
Yeah, you probably heard this news even before I did. Is I think she was like a 55-year-old woman, probably I think around 200 pounds, who did the longest swim from Golden Gate Bridge out to some little rocky outcropping out there in the Pacific, and made her way back. It's a huge sensation.
Yeah, insane. Yeah, the people people like that do the kind of long sea swims are incredible.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing where you have to wake up, before sunrise, and you wrap up after dark. And so, man, at least if you're running through the night, seeing vampires on thrones, you know that if you lay down for a minute, you won't sink to the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, you look at everything that you've done so far, and what's to come. Obviously, a full life in addition to these outsized achievements. And you are doing it as a woman, and this isn't just sort of fluff. This is like this is a real test that really experienced competitive athletes set expectations. It was really what you've done was surprising even to the absolute pros and the champions in this line of athleticism. How do you feel about the trajectory of women's sports today? How do you feel about prospects for women athletes?
Yeah, I feel really positive. I feel that things are moving in the right direction. I feel like we're breaking down the barriers, the kind of perceptions of what women are capable of, breaking through the glass ceilings, I guess. And the kind of, the world is opening up. I think it's getting better and better, and I'm really inspired by, just take trail running. There's there's women like Courtney DeWater that's like setting these incredible records in the kind of long distance trail races, and the real kind of classic ones, and Camille Herron, who's setting sort of new records from the 6-day running record and that sort of thing. So yeah, everywhere you look, there's in running and outside that in sport, women are doing really great things, and I think it's exciting to see. It's a really good time to be a woman in sport, I think.
And I think it's especially interesting in your case because just overtake, say, the past 10 or 20 years, a lot of the messaging around kind of like women's sports and and kind of ambitious women more generally is like, well, if you sacrifice everything, you can do anything you want. If you're willing to set aside your personal life, give up on a family, that was kind of the message, I think. And that certainly that can work for a man or a woman depending on what you're willing to sacrifice. But what we didn't get a lot of was you can be a mother and achieve things that push the limits of human ability, not just get rich or advance to a certain level of fame or prominence, but really at sort of like a deep level discover that you have strengths and an ability to, let's face it, just suffer that can get you more than money or more than fleeting fame, something that really speaks to, resonates with the human condition in the deepest way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's amazing. Maybe the kind of ability to do that is helped by having those experiences that, the more broadly of having that family. Maybe in some ways you can draw some strength from that as well when you kind of face those challenges. But yeah, I think, it's wonderful that we kind of reach that point where we can maybe, where we can see people doing both and being able to have a family and still kind of explore these dreams that they have.
Yeah. And, speaking as an American here in the place that more or less created professional sports as we know it on planet Earth now, there's such an appetite from audiences, yes, but I think at this point even more so from frankly from corporations to try to professionalize every type of human athleticism that's out there. And I recognize that it can be entertaining and whatever, and people like to make the money, and it's just a reach for glory and become notorious or whatever. But isn't it important that there are still some ways of achieving that sort of profound human distinction, physically, psychologically, spiritually, that aren't professionalized, that aren't going to put you on that cereal box or get you that Nike deal? Do you think there's something almost, precious or sacred about pushing yourself to those limits, just really for its own sake, for your own sake, rather than for the cash and the glory?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm probably like the living example of that. Yeah, I for sure believe it because, I certainly have no kind of desire to be famous. I stepped away from a sponsor on purpose because I didn't really kind of enjoy being an, ambassador for any kind of sportswear company, and I prefer to kind of be able to send my own messages in terms of kind of climate awareness and kind of responsible consumerism. And I have my own job and I can just do it for the love of it. And certainly for me, it's about the challenge of it. I think that's the wonderful thing about Barkley is that people don't go there to become. I think that people don't go there to become famous because the point is you need to want to do Barkley for yourself entirely. It needs to be about that race. That challenge is exactly what you're, I think, trying to get at. It's just about that kind of personal challenge, that sort of inner question that you have with yourself of what you're capable of and what's possible and what's going to happen to you once you kind of reach the wall for the 100th time in those 60 hours and how you deal with it. And that's something that nobody can. I don't think it's enough to kind of the thrill or the desire to be famous is not enough to get you through that race. You need to really want to do it for you and for finding out, I guess, finding out more about who you are. So I think that's what sport really is. It's not about the kind of commercialization of it. I think it's about that kind of human endeavor, and that's still there in sport anyway. It's just that there's this added element, isn't there, of everything kind of being made profitable to some extent, and that's where it has to work for athletes to make money and for it to be a career. But I think it's wonderful that kind of can remain in the purest form as well.
Well,
I don't know if I kind of
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I said, I've known a few marathon runners and ultramarathon runners, and from what I can gather, there's a bit of a negative stereotype that goes around sometimes about the long distance runners, and it's that they've got demons. They have to keep running, or else they're going to fall prey to whatever it is that troubles them in their deepest, darkest secrets. It sounds like you don't have any of that going on, really. That it's all upside to you. Do you find that it's the case that a lot of that a lot of sort of people who are at your level are as equally almost just blissful or commonsensical in the way that they think about pushing themselves in that way? Do you think it's actually like a misconception that a lot of folks who do push themselves that hard are doing so as a way of trying to convert really a self-destructive impulse into something more constructive?
I think, no, I absolutely think that it's not the case of kind of what you're kind of suggesting, this kind of stereotypical image maybe of the long distance runner. I think it's very much more about the kind of joy of discovery and of challenge and of finding out more. There's a thrill of doing that, you know. I think it's very much more a positive thing. Certainly the people I've met at Barkley, for example, those people going back to the forest that have been there multiple times. It's like such a positive atmosphere. The whole thing is like this incredible warm family. And when you go out there, you have the hardest times, but there's this shared camaraderie of struggle, and yeah, it's really positive. It's not a negative thing at all.
Yeah,
it's not like people change.
Let's talk a little bit about pain management. It's got to hurt, right? At on some level, and so if to the degree that it hurts, it doesn't seem like you have a sort of superhuman tolerance for pain and suffering. How do you manage it? How do you deal with it? Especially if it's something you got to deal with over the long haul. I mean, unfortunately, it's just the truth that a lot of people nowadays, when they have some kind of chronic pain, whether it's from an injury or whether it's because they spend a lot of time in the gym or whatever, it's just so easy to reach for those painkillers, reach for those pills, reach for the shots, and it's encouraged. We've got a pharmaceutical industry that is just ready to throw whatever kind of, take the pain away that you want them to do. Oftentimes those companies will just straight up encourage doctors to hand out the prescriptions like candy. This is a totally different way of thinking about pain and thinking about pain management that you seem to be expressing.
Yeah, I guess maybe to some extent I've always had to some, more of an ability to sort of just ignore pain or override it, just put it to one side in a way. I remember when I was like younger at one point, I went, this is a bit of a kind of offshoot of your answer, but I went raspberry picking and there was loads of stinging nettles and I just decided it's all right, just ignore them. And I picked raspberries like all afternoon. I got incredibly stung legs, and that night I couldn't sleep because they were all completely stung. But it was just like remarkable how much you could just just like switch off to it. I very much felt that with Barkley on the last leap. I had kind of quite bad tendinitis, and I just actually just told myself it's a nerve signal from your legs, and you can just ignore it and just run normally because you need to run fast. So I think some of that comes with the sort of I think to some extent you can train yourself, like your head, to like just like keep pushing on to bear the discomfort, and then you sort of, I guess you can build that up to some extent, the ability to do that.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it seems like the best way to figure out how to deal with that kind of pain is to simply just put yourself in a situation where you're going to experience it. This is nothing compared to what you go through, but a short while ago, I failed to notice until it was too late that I was being sort of eaten alive by no-see-ums, like those little almost invisible flies. And, I counted the bites, and there were about 300 of them, and feet started to swell up. And it was really like a challenging pain. It was prolonged. It was about 2 weeks of recovery, and it's not something that you can sort of seek out in order to teach yourself something about pain. It's something you got to just find yourself in and just see, you really see what you're made of in those moments where there's nowhere to escape. You are stuck with your pain, and you're just going to have to find a way to do what it is that you're in the middle of doing. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing sounds to me exactly as well like childbirth. Like you're a child, like literally there's no escaping it. You're like it's a one-way street. You have to just like ride it out. So I'm not saying that ultra running is the same as that, but there's elements of that, just being able to kind of just ride it out. The difference is obviously that when you're ultra running, you always have the option of saying I'm stopping now, I'm backing out. Whereas if you're giving birth to a baby, you can't do that. But there are some similarities.
Yeah, not really a DNF situation in childbirth most of the time, huh? All right.
No.
Well, there's one thing else that I kind of want to get into with you, and that's just like all-round health. You can't push yourself to the limits that you go to unless you got some basic baseline of health. And for a lot of people, that's just kind of where the conversation ends. There are so many reasons for this. We could talk about the food supply and what's going on with food. We could talk about habits. We could talk about the workplace. We could talk about how bad mental health imposes limits on physical health. you can't help but notice that large numbers of people, this isn't just the US, the UK, it's across the West. A lot of people are in bad shape physically. The obesity rate's going up and all other kinds of indicators going in the wrong direction. You know, I'm not going to ask you to solve the world's problems here, but I am curious, you know, when you sort of take a look outside your door and see what seems to be this, you know, this great malaise and so many people just kind of going knowingly in an unhealthy direction. Do you think there's any way out of that that's not just sort of the same kind of cheerful common sense attitude that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I do realize that I am incredibly privileged with, you know, with the upbringing I've had and the life I've been able to kind of build for myself. But I guess one thing that I think is really good is to have this, like, to have some connection to, you know, not only the natural world in terms of kind of being outdoors and having that ability to exercise in the outdoors, but even like in terms of what you eat, you know, like we're lucky we have a vegetable patch in the garden, we can grow our own food and cook it afterwards. Just and that knowledge of where you're, you know, what you're putting into yourself, I guess that somehow that connection to the cooking the food and enjoying that process, I guess all those things kind of help in terms of nourishing yourself, and both physically, as I said, with kind of being outdoors, and then actually in terms of what your nutrition of what you're putting into your mouth, and just that spiritually as well, I guess. So I guess what I'm trying to say is in some way kind of being in touch with what's more real, really. I think probably in today's world it can be hard to kind of get to that, because there's so much, we're surrounded by so much stuff, and when you try and kind of peel away that's why I love being in the mountains, when we kind of go back to those weeks of hiking, when you kind of go down to like absolutely the bare minimum of what you need to eat, you need to find somewhere to sleep, and you need to find some fresh water, and that's it. You know, like it goes down to those things. I guess we don't have enough of that probably in our lives today.
Yeah. Outside of your work as a scientist, how much technology do you use?
Not very much. I
Yeah,
mean, I
that's
have
the
a phone.
impression I got.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a computer for work. I have a phone. I don't even tend to. I listen to music if I have to go to the gym, which I do if I'm kind of cross training or if I'm injured. But when I'm in the hills, I don't listen to the music or anything. I just run,
Yeah.
kind of being more in touch with the sounds around me, the wildlife and things. I feel like that's when I kind of enter this meditative state when I'm running.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much of that is really kind of the secret ingredient. It's not necessarily that tech is bad, you know, but it's that all this other stuff that we already have for free at our fingertips, it's really good.
Yeah, that's why I keep coming back to this kind of being able to just be, you know, like I think sometimes if you just go out into a wild place and don't have all the other stuff around you, and it's just focusing on those simple things, it just lets you think and it just lets you be. And that's probably what we're missing, most of us, a lot of the time, that connection to what's kind of the real stuff.
When you're in that meditative state, are you thinking thoughts more often, or are you just kind of soaking in what your senses are giving you?
I often just don't think very much, I think. I think if there's something worrying me, I can work through it to some extent, but not even necessarily consciously. It's more of a kind of, I feel better afterwards. I've kind of, yeah, I've processed it in some way, but it's not like a conscious thing that I'm working through it in my head as I run. Often I'll just switch off completely, and it's just everything seems more more ordered by the time I get back. Just probably comes with the endorphins of it as well, but also just the kind of time out. So often I just don't think about anything at all when I'm running. Sometimes I do, but yeah, often I don't.
Do you have any great epiphanies or revelations, whether you're in the midst of a run or afterwards?
Sometimes, I mean, I think if you have the kind of, I mean, this last weekend I was running a race actually called the Scottish Islands Peaks Race, which is a race that you go between the islands. It's a race where you do, there's 3 sailors and 2 runners on a team, and you sail between the islands off the west coast of Scotland. And on the islands, the runners have to kind of do a hill run. They're all kind of in the region of 20 miles up the kind of mountains, and then you sail to the next island. It's the best race. It's really, really good fun. And on the middle island, one called Jura this year, we had the most incredible evening sunset weather as we ran across. It was this inversion, cloud inversion. It was just one of the most spectacular evenings I've ever had in the mountains. And I just guess left me completely sort of open mouthed. I couldn't believe what I was seeing around me. So I think moments like that, sometimes you have moments like that that are honestly like epiphany moments. But just, I guess it's just more of a kind of, just more of a kind of amazement at how beautiful the world is.
Well, I'm actually glad that you used that example, because now I can ask you one more thing before I let you go. Is most of these long distance runs, it's very much a solitary, it's you versus the world, and it's you versus the rest of the pack, and not really an opportunity for that team aspect of sports. But it sounds like you guys have figured out how to weave team sports into the world of crazy long distance running. What have you learned, whether it's from that race or others maybe like it, about teamwork and about what you need to trust from someone else if you really want to reach that level with them?
I mean, I think there's so much teamwork in kind of long distance races. You're right, there's some you're on your own, but like take Barkley, for example. I think the only reason that so many people, the 5 people, managed to finish this year was that we worked together. And that makes a big difference kind of mentally. It makes a difference in terms of navigation. You just draw on each other's strengths. And there's something really incredible about the friendships that you form and the bonds that you form with people that you kind of go through events like that with, ultra kind of events where you really put yourself past the red line, I guess, in terms of what you're trying to do. It sort of brings you together in a way that's difficult to do in everyday life. So I think you very much form bonds with people, and there's very much a community in the ultra running scene. Especially once you start to do races like the Spine and like Tour de Gion, which I'm doing in Italy. Like Damien and John Kelly and several of the people that were at Barkley are going to be there again, and I can't wait to spend some more crazy hallucination fueled nights of hours of running through the big mountains with them as well when I'm there.
Absolutely incredible. Well, Jasmin Paris, thank you for joining us. Keep running. We'll be chasing, but I doubt any of us are going to catch up with you anytime soon.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, that's all we've got until next time around. So, this is Zero Hour. I'm James Poulos. May God have mercy on us all.